Welcome to the First Church in Chestnut Hill and our Sunday service for July 12th, 2020. Welcome if it's your first time. Welcome if it's your 100th time. And please feel free to share the link to this service if there is anyone in your life, your extended life, who could use a little church right now. Now for our reading. First, a selection from Psalm 119. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. I have sworn an oath and confirmed it, to observe your righteous ordinances. I am severely afflicted. Give me my life, O Lord, according to your word. Accept my offerings of praise, O Lord, and teach me your ordinances. I hold my life in my hands continually, but I do not forget your law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, but I do not stray from your precepts. Your decrees are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. I incline my heart to perform your statutes forever, to the end. The next reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses 29 to 34. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So Esau swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So ends the reading.
Feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green, and was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen, and did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills, and was Jerusalem builded here Bring me my spear, oh clouds unfold. Bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land.
What did we hear? I am about to die, of what use is a birthright to me? Esau and Jacob were the sons of Isaac and Rebekah, and the grandsons of Abraham. They were also twins. Esau is technically the eldest, as he was the firstborn, and he thus is to receive his birthright from Isaac. But what does that mean, birthright? It likely included an additional inheritance, like an additional share of his father's possessions. But more importantly, the birthright would have passed along the mantle of leadership to Esau. He was to be the head of the family. He was to be the chief of the tribe. He would have been set over his brother Jacob and any other siblings or relations. Esau was to be the patriarch. But Jacob bought away that birthright for a bowl of lentils. At the time, Esau and Jacob were probably 15 years old, which is young by our standards, but fully adults in ancient times. Esau was a hunter roving the outdoors in search of game. Jacob was more of a homebody, but he was the craftier child, more intelligent, more cunning. Isaac favored Esau, and their mother her mother Rebekah favored Jacob. Esau and Jacob were not identical twins. We know this because it is clearly pointed out that Esau was a redhead. It is perhaps implicit to the author of this biblical passage that the audience would have some preconceived notion of the significance of red hair. Impulsive, prone to anger, wilder by nature. Yes, ginger bashing had made its way into the Bible thousands of years ago. Then again, it might be argued that the actions of Esau may have caused that bashing from the start. Esau does not come off as the brightest of stars in the heavens. He sold away his birthright for a bunch of beans to his brother, who didn't even own those beans in the first place. Isaac was the father, the patriarch, so he owned everything. Jacob presumed to buy the birthright with something that he didn't even possess. Whether that suggests Jacob as being more clever or Esau as less intelligent, that can be debated. As the patriarch, as the head of a tribe, Esau would have had a great deal of authority. For example, he would have been called upon to settle disputes. And that wasn't the job of a mediator. It was the imposition of law itself. He would have been judge and jury rolled up into one. As the eldest, that role would have been his regardless of whether someone else was perhaps more capable of doing it. Over time, we will see that Jacob is quite intelligent, though not infallible. He will make mistakes. He will be tricked into doing things on his own. He will even wrestle with God by the riverside, quite famously. And for this reason, he will be renamed Israel by God, meaning one who struggles with God. And you may wonder, why would God favor such a man, someone who cheated his own brother? A man who later would trick his own blind father into giving him a blessing as if he were the eldest child. Why would God look upon Jacob so favorably? Let's be honest, Jacob's not perfect. He lies and he cheats. And yet Esau is not exactly up to the task of leading the tribe. He sold away something of great importance for a bowl of lentils. You might call that impulsive. You might call it just plain old stupid. We're told the story of Esau and Jacob to get a sense of these two men. But Esau then mostly just fades away into the background while Jacob takes a prominent role in the book of Genesis and to the rest of the Bible. But we hear just enough about Esau to find out why he is considered unsuitable for this role of patriarch. For example, his very name means something, hairy or rough, in Hebrew. We are being signaled that we're supposed to be rooting for the other guy in the story because Esau has a wild appearance. Now the name Jacob, that can be translated into the word heel, because supposedly he and Esau were always fighting in the womb itself. And when they were being born, Jacob grabbed onto his brother's heels as he was being born. The early sign of conflict also implies that they would struggle with each other throughout life, and that the younger twin would never be satisfied with a lesser role. There are other parts of the story that we don't hear in this small portion. For example, we don't hear that Esau would later take a Canaanite woman as his wife. And this is greatly upsetting to Isaac and Jacob, who expected their sons to follow Abraham's requirement that they marry someone from their tribe. And as a result of this disapproval, Esau becomes closer to his uncle, Ishmael, who similarly was rejected by his father, Abraham, and who would marry an Egyptian woman. Ishmael became the father of the Arab people, and similarly, Esau would be declared the father of the people of Edom, which is now a part of Jordan. And they would later become rivals for the people of Israel, and thus the tension continues through generations. The modern reader, however, doesn't know any of this. We wouldn't know the meaning behind the Hebrew names. We might not understand the significance of marrying someone outside of our tribe, though such sensibilities are not unknown in the present day. We look upon the story with little evidence of any of that underlying and complicated prejudice at play because of these old signals of what Esau represents. The treatment of Esau might simply just come off to us as unfair. And I will be honest, it is unfair, given the little that we know. Not just because he was mistreated for being a redhead, not only because he was an impulsive teenager, and not even because he was seemingly less intelligent than his crafty brother. The treatment of Esau was unfair because it was a winner-take-all system. No matter which of the brothers was chosen, it would be unfair to the other brother. This was an atypical situation because we're dealing with twins born merely minutes or seconds apart. But it doesn't suddenly get more fair if one of the brothers had been born a year later. And no matter what the birth order was, a daughter would never have been entitled to take over that position of power. Talk about unfair. The logic of concentrating authority in one person was to maintain strength and wealth in a family with one indisputable leader. Dividing flocks of sheep or acres of farmland dilutes that power of the tribe or the clan or the family. And that's a sentiment as familiar in the English Isles of the 19th century as it was in the ancient wilderness of the Middle East. But that rough calculus gives everything to one in the hope of maintaining a critical mass of power. Not necessarily making the best choice among the candidates to put someone in charge, or even the fairest division among family members for whatever their needs and whatever the reasons. The Bible serves as a source of wisdom and of moral instruction. There are, of course, difficulties translating the text from Hebrew and Greek into English. There are even greater problems translating the lessons of 2,000 or 3,000 years ago into modern terms. Much of our sense of a modern world required the setting aside of all of these historical examples. The eldest son does not automatically inherit everything. Women are allowed greater roles in society and within the family. We do not allow people to have multiple wives, and we don't allow them to enslave anyone. The Bible is a source of wisdom for living. It is not an exacting yardstick for life. The lessons of the Bible do not necessitate the adoption of these biblical examples of family, law, or society. Which is helpful because, honestly, the Bible doesn't even agree with itself. One book will undermine the next, one passage will reject another. The lessons of the later prophets and writers in the Bible try to move away from some of these earlier versions that come from the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And one of those strongly revisionist prophets was Jesus. I once read that God is not seeking perfect souls from this world, but instead seeks out great ones. Not perfect souls, but great ones. I don't wholly agree with that phrasing, but I think that it is on to something. I think it is trending at least in the right direction. What is the difference between perfection and greatness? Well, perfection means flawless. Perfection means without blemish. Perfection means without sin. And that flies in the face of the notion that no one can ever be sinless, meaning having lived a life without any mistakes, without any regrets, without any shortcomings. But logic is a small hurdle in the life of the mind. Human beings readily adopt unrealistic measures of beauty or markers of success. We do it all the time. Why not do it with morality? Just as those worldly standards are impossible to meet, the expectation that we could ever live without faltering, without any misstep, that's entirely unrealistic. Honestly, it's not even healthy. Mistakes allow for us to improve. Missteps allow us to correct course. And sin? The recognition that we have sinned in some ways requires us to understand the harm that we have done. That doesn't make sinning good, but the recognition of sin provides us an opportunity to grow ever better. The United States Constitution calls for a formation of a more perfect union. Not perfect, more perfect. Perfecting as never-ending improvement, as a goal ever on the horizon, not a state of utopia that you achieved the day you wrote it down. So if you can't be perfect, why not be great? And by great, I don't mean important. I don't mean significant. Greatness in this sense has more to do with depth. It has to do with capacity. One might say that it's the bigness of the soul. And soul has nothing to do with who we claim to be in life and who we were born to in families. There are no wealthy souls. There are no intelligent souls. There are no powerful souls. Souls are a spiritual factor. The soul is, in a sense, the window into our innermost being, who we are ultimately, who we appear to be in the eyes of God. And when we are concerning ourselves with ultimate matters, it doesn't matter much how much money you have or how you can throw your political or intellectual weight around. Conversely, the soul is a way for the world to look through each of us and catch a glimpse of God. Not that we are God, no, not at all, but that what matters most in this life and the next is reflected in ourselves, reflected in us from God. Perhaps a better term for greatness in this sense might be goodness, but then we risk getting into that perfection language. No one is perfectly good. No one can be perfectly good. The question of goodness is about the intent behind what we do and who we're striving to be. And we might mess it up and still, on balance, be good. It is said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but the pathway to heaven is not traveled by those who lead perfect lives, because heaven, my friends, would be empty. Greatness of soul, again, is not about perfection, perfect goodness, or perfect actions. It's about an intention to turn towards God. Not in every moment of our lives, not in every step that we take. It is greatness in balance. A balance we measure out in those many moments of striving and living. A balance that can and only will be measured in the eyes of a loving God, a God who knows our many flaws and loves us nonetheless. A God who commanded us to love each other, realizing that we could not do so perfectly. In this sense, each life is a work in progress, and few journeys through life are completely straight, entirely simple, or even vaguely easy. But there is hope when all is said and done. Of all people, God knows what we went through, what you meant to others and what others meant to you, what your intentions were, what their intentions towards you were. And overcoming past difficulties and making up for past mistakes is about returning to God, more so than any life supposedly lived with stainless steel perfection. Jacob wasn't perfect. In his life, he struggled with misfortune and with God. Esau also made more than a few mistakes, but in time he would be reconciled with his brother. If you leaf through the Bible, you'll quickly realize that it wasn't populated with perfect people. Not even close. Not Jacob or Esau, not Isaac or Abraham, not Peter or Paul or James. I will leave Mary and Jesus off that particular list because that would require a much longer sermon. In short, God asked us to love and to care for one another. This is a reflection of how open we are, how concerned we are. But it also requires us to realize those moments when we fall short of that mark of loving. Not because that becomes a horrible demerit, not that it will destroy our permanent, eternal record, but because the recognition of how we make mistakes one day will help us to avoid doing so perhaps the next. Which is fortunate, very fortunate, because no one's perfect. Amen.
We gather to us the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to his name, he forgets not his own. Beside us to guide us, our God with us joining, ordaining, maintaining his kingdom divine. So from the beginning, the fight we were winning, the Lord was at our side, oh glory be thine. We are to extol the triumphant, and pray that those still defender will be, that thy congregation escape tribulation, thy name be ever praised, O Lord, make us free.
We will close our time together by saying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our service is ended. May our service to God and to one another never truly end. Be safe, be well, and God bless you all. Goodbye.
Thank